Welcome to this demonstration on how to install Symantec Encryption Desktop utilizing Silent Enrollment. Before we start, let's go over some of the requirements around Silent Enrollment. First, it's going to have to be enabled within the consumer policy that's pushed down to the client. Secondly, the client has to authenticate via LDAP enrollment as opposed to email. Third, we only support server key mode. And lastly, there's an installation switch which we need to override. By default, during install, single sign-on is disabled. We need it enabled. And lastly, we have to ensure that any interactive installation features that are going to ask questions or ask for input, like local self-recovery and SD smart card authentication, are disabled. For additional information, we have a couple white papers that you can go to, one on silent install and the second one is on the MSI install switches themselves. Now let's get on with the demonstration. I'm going into the management console, logging in as Joe, to do two things: to create the installation package, but before I do that I want to make sure all of my settings are correct and I fulfill all my requirements. So let's log in, and the first place I want to go is to consumer. So up at the top, click on consumer, and then on the second level, my GUI, I want to go to directory synchronization. Here's where we have the setting for single sign-on. For LDAP enrollment. It looks like I'm using an Active Directory. Let's go in and check the settings for that Active Directory, and sure enough, there's my LDAP enrollment setting, and it is enabled. Good. Enroll clients using directory authentication. That's good. Let's go check the other settings. Those settings are in the consumer policy, so I'm going to go into the consumer policy that's going to be utilized for my clients, the Acme remote laptop. In the general card, we have the actual setting for silent enrollment. Let's enable that. Good. Then also in the policy, I'm going to go to drive encryption. Looks like we have a virtual disk. That's not going to affect us, but that will be built at enrollment time using NTFS. Good. Where I want to go is into the drive encryption here. It looks like we're going to encrypt our drive at installation time, and we're going to use standard authentication. Here's one of the switches you want to make sure is set correctly. You don't want to select the smart card here. So that'll cause on the enrollment the asking for the PIN number. Then down further here we have the allow local self-recovery. That's the 5 questions that are going to get asked during enrollment. We can't have that set for silent enrollment. So let's save that. Looks like we have our policy pretty good order. Now let's go back to consumer groups. In the consumer groups, notice down at the bottom there's the selection for creating your download installation package. So let's select that. We're going to create a desktop package, installation package, and the client we're going to go to is a Windows 32-bit. We use English. Not really going to customize because we do need auto detect policy group. That's part of that LDAP enrollment. So we can't preset a policy for it. And then down here we also have, in the lower part of the screen, we have our management server, where it's located. We got to tell the client where the management server is so it can go get its policy. Alright, let's create the package. And since we have to override that switch, that MSI switch, there's 2 ways we can do it. We can do it through command line, or we could use a tool to modify the MSI, such as Orca. As such, I think what we'll do is we won't run it, we'll save it. We'll save it to a temporary directory on the C drive. So let's go to the computer, let's go to the C drive, let's go to temp. Yeah, let's go to that temp directory, and we'll save it there. Good. Let's save it. So now we have our installation pack with all the settings properly set. Now let's install. So we're going to install it on the system we're on. It's a Windows XP system. Let's go to the command. Alright, let's go to temp, back to temp. Only thing in temp, if I remember, is the MSI. So I could, this is one of the ways I could do the installation. I could use a command line, and I could type in the good old MSI exe execute /I for the input file. The input file is the PGP desktop _en-us-.msi. Here's where we override that switch, that MSI switch. PGP, this is the parm, PGP install _ disable single sign-on enroll. Now I made a typo here, so I put in a call-out box because I need =0. That disables it. I forgot to put in the =0. That's one way we could do it. The other way we could do it is we could use Orca. So I'm going into Orca now. Then I'm loading into Orca the MSI. And in the MSI, I go to Properties. Orca allows you to modify the switches within the MSI itself. So I go to Properties, and then I'm going to look for that PGP install _ disable. There it is. Disable single sign-on. A 1 means you're going to disable it, but we don't want it disabled, so we need to change this to 0. Let's go in and edit it and change it to 0. Alright. Save this guy. And we'll do a save as and use the same name, but let's append to the name maybe -silent or something. Yeah, -silent. Alright, let's save it. Now I don't need to specify the parameter. This is what you would do if you're going to use a software deployment tool like SCCM or our great Altera's product. So now what I can do is on my MSI exec, I can just use the modified MSI. Good. We're off. We're installing. Alright, now this is the actual download of the package itself, the product itself. We're going to have to go through a reboot on the product in order to invoke the drivers, to get the drivers loaded. So we're going to come to a reboot here after the product has been pushed down, after the desktop has been pushed down. And we're going to take the reboot. And when we boot up, we're going to authenticate. We're going to authenticate with our AD credentials. Those are going to be cached, and they're going to be used for the single sign-on enrollment. And what I expect to see, and here we are, Joe again, and I put in my passphrase. Now this is going to be cached. So we enabled a single sign-on. Alright, and what you normally would see with, if it wasn't silent, you'd see a pop-up for the LDAP authentication credentials, asking you for your credentials. But we cached those, so we're not going to see it. So we're not going to see any interaction at all. It is silent. At some point, what you're going to see is, like down in the right-hand corner, is that the encryption is occurring on your C drive. And you'll see down there the icon with that twirling circle, which says you're in the process of encrypting your hard drive. Sure enough, the product is installed. If I go in, I can look at my PGP disk and take a look at the actual encrypted disk, and I can see, yep, it's my C drive, and it's like 4.7% encrypted. It's being encrypted right now. It's up to 5 now. And also, if you remember correctly, we had that virtual drive, and I can see that virtual drive. I can go in, and there's that virtual drive, that 10 gigabyte virtual drive that we had seen on part of that consumer policy. So what we've seen is single sign-on, silent enrollment. I'm sorry, guys, using single sign-on. Hopefully this was informative for you. Thank you for attending.